I'd just like to introduce myself. I'm Vicky Jones. I work for Helen Sanderson Associates. My background in reviews is that while working for my own local authority, I trained other people to facilitate and facilitated myself a number of person-centred reviews in both adults and children's services, but particularly around transition. I don't work for a local authority anymore, so my current thinking and learning around reviews is by going out and training in other places. John, over to you.
Thanks, Vicky. Hi, my name's John Rouse. Also work for Helen Sanderson Associates and been doing person-centred reviews since about 2002. Working in the local authority and also in health. Currently, I'm supporting a local primary school to develop person-centred reviews for all their young people with statements of special educational needs. I'll hand you over to Vicky now, and she'll just go through the objectives of our webinar today.
Thanks, John. What we're going to be looking at today are the benefits of using person-centred reviews. We're going to look at what a person-centred review looks like, how best to prepare for a person-centred review, and best practice in facilitating a review, what you need to do following the review, and how to involve people with complex needs in their own review.
Thanks, Vicky. I just spend a couple of minutes, or just a couple of seconds really, just thinking about what images come to your mind when you think about review meetings. I'm just wondering whether they kind of look like this. It's just a fight. My experience working in health and in local authorities, sometimes it feels like it's a them and us situation where we just kind of fight against each other. It's trying to get our voices heard, and it's sometimes just a real nightmare. Sometimes it feels like you're just pulling your hair out. You know, I'm a parent myself. I have a daughter with some learning difficulties, and sometimes in service I just feel like myself and my wife, we're just pulling our hair out, trying to get the best really for our son or daughter. And sometimes I think, you know, I've been to review meetings or meetings about the individuals where it feels like sometimes people just can't be really bothered about why they're there. And I think this is a great image you can see in front of you. You've got a guy messing about with his computer. You've got somebody falling asleep. You've got somebody kind of doodling. Well, perhaps not on somebody's ear, but I often see people doodling, not really paying full attention of the reasons why we're there. So in summary, when I look at review meetings, I often think about this picture here. So, you know, it just isn't working. You know, we're sitting around a table, it's grey, it's boring. People come to meetings, and even just the word meeting doesn't kind of make people feel motivated. It's the same old agenda, nothing really changes. I remember going to meetings that talked about the previous meeting, that talked about that previous meeting. Nothing really seemed to have changed. And not having a voice. You know, so often people in power seem to do a lot of talking and not really much listening. So I'm going to pass you over to Vicky now, and she's just going to give you a little start to think about person-centred reviews.
Person-centred reviews are a way to change everything that John's just been talking about. They put the person at the centre of the review, the centre of their support, basing actions on what's important to them and how they want to be supported now and in the future. It looks at what's working and what's not working for them and for the people. The process can meet all of statutory requirements, but the spirit, the atmosphere, and most importantly, the outcomes are really very different to traditional reviews. Person-centred reviews have been taking place across the country in all areas of service, from children and young people in education, older people, and people living with dementia to those using probation services. The responses from people using services, families, as well as professionals have been really positive.
Okay, I'd just like to spend some time just thinking about the kind of development or the history of person-centred reviews, if that's okay with you. There are two people really that have developed a person-centred toolkit almost. There's a guy in America called Michael Smart and a lady in England called Helen Sanderson. And Helen was going out with this person-centred toolkit, and she just wondered, would it work within a traditional statement review or an annual review for a young person with special needs? And so she started in Hull and went and took this toolkit and tried to do and facilitate a review in a different way. And after being in Hull, you know, it got wind and it came south a bit. And 4 London boroughs actually piloted the person-centred reviews. And again, very successful, worked really well. We thought about how to put the young person at the centre. And this was about the same time when Valuing People came out. And after the four boroughs, it became a national programme. And I guess that's when Vicky and myself got involved. The 9 kind of regions, 152 local authorities were all given training on person-centred reviews, birthed out of this vision around valuing people. It really started with young people with learning disabilities at year 9 in school or at 14+ review. That's called a transition review. And we know now from Valuing People Now, and the statement from that is that all young people aged between 14 and 19 with a statement of special educational needs and a learning disability will have a person-centred review, well, by last year. And it's kind of interesting, because when I look around that, is it just for people with a learning disability and a statement of special educational needs, or could it be for more people? Here's a picture of Zach. Zach's 4 years old. Well, he's just come preschool, coming into primary year school 1, right next to his speech and language therapist, who's in that red T-shirt, both contributing, both having a voice about how Zach is. Zach's got his little brother there with him, helping out as well. So it's not just for 14 to 19. Here's Zach, that's just about 4. So, you know, reviews are for people younger than 14. But we also know that reviews are older, for older people as well. Here's Winnie, who's had a person-centred review. And I just love the phrase that she said. She said, I might be 104, but I enjoy a nip of whiskey in my tea and a wagon wheel at supper. You know, it's gorgeous. And it's finding out those things that are important to people is so, so, so important. On our journey, we tried different types of review. We did year 9 to 14, and we called it an important 2-4 review, combining with a thinking tool, working, not working. But what we found as people moved towards adult life is they just did the same old thing. They were just thinking about what was available from them, not what was important to them or what's possible for them. So we developed a second review called the Citizenship Review. And this really thought not just what's available for young people as they move through, but what was available, what was possible for people around life, around home, around work, around money, around support, and really try to unlock our thinking based on 6 keys to citizenship. We also did a different style of review called outcome-focused review. We realised at the time people were getting money up front, a personal budget, or an individual budget to buy their own services, and that money had to be spent on their outcomes. So we developed a review thinking about their outcomes, or outcome-focused reviews. So we had 3 or 4 different reviews happening all at the same time. But what we realised is that it was, for some, it was confusing. People called it a year 9 review, but what happens at year 10 or year 11 or year 12? When do you start a citizenship review, and can you go back to an important 2-4 review? Some people just did working, not working. Do you have to have an outcome-focused review only if you've got a support plan and a personal budget? So our learning in Helen Simonson Associates realised that it's actually well, it's like the Einstein quote: everything should be made as simple as possible, but not simpler. So we've just decided that there should be just one review that kind of encompasses all those aspects of our learning over the last 6 or 7 years. And Vicky's going to tell us now about those kind of components, what happens within a person-centred review.
Thanks, John. So why would you want a person-centred review, and what difference would it make? Well, person-centred reviews do what they say on the tin. They involve the person and they make sure that they are at the centre of any planning. But they also make sure that people are living the life they want to and celebrate the things that are working really well for them. They encourage people to aspire to improve their lives and identify what isn't working, therefore changing what needs to be changed. They identify next steps and they set realistic actions to achieve this. They're outcome focused. They gather information to be shared and develop person-centered information. For professionals who are juggling enormous demands on their time, the person-centered review doesn't take any more time, but has a very different outcome. For many professionals, it's much more satisfying way of working and means that professionals aren't sitting around the table reading from their reports. So what does one look like? What does a person-centred review look like? Well, to start with, there isn't a great big table in the middle of the room for people to sit around and read out their reports. The room's usually set up with flip charts on the wall, each of which asks a question. The chairs are set out informally, and there's usually music playing in the background to welcome people into a warm and friendly atmosphere. And the person whose review it is can choose the music for themselves. There's refreshments of the person's choice available, and loads of different coloured pens for people to write with. So let's think about the headings. What are those questions? Well, first of all, we're asking who's here, and this enables us to have a record of who's contributed to the review. Then we're asking, what do we appreciate about the person? People are invited to share positive information about the person, the things that make them smile, the things that make them glad that they know them. This is a really empowering part of the review, and more than anything, it begins a meeting with a clear sense of it being different to traditional reviews. It helps to remind those at the meeting to think beyond the person's diagnosis or what's wrong in their life and to see them as an individual with gifts and capacities. It could be things like how thoughtful someone is, how helpful a child might be in the classroom, someone's sense of humour, or it could reflect someone's practical gifts or skills, such as being a brilliant cook or a gardener. Then we look at what progress on action. So we're looking back at reviews that have gone by in previous years, and this helps us to see what's been achieved since the last meeting and to really celebrate those things, as well as to see if anything has not been achieved or addressed. It's important to check these things out, as actions often get forgotten or not fully addressed if there has been a change in staff or an obstacle of some sort. Then we're looking at what's important to the person now. Looking at these things that are important to the person makes sure that their lives, that we focus on the things that really matter to the person, the things that make them happy. It could be really small things like having a cup of tea and a biscuit every afternoon at 3 o'clock, to other things such as staying healthy to keep out of hospital or being able to see family and friends. We need to gather information from the person and those who know them best about the things that must be present in the whole of their life. Then we're thinking about the same things for the future, what's important for the future. This is about moving things forward and thinking about those things that are important to the person, not just now, but the things that must be present in their lives for the future. We can also think here about the things that need to happen in the future, things that may not be important to the person, but have to happen to support the person well, or to keep them healthy and safe. This could be something such as for a child in care to continue to have contact with a parent, but could also be about them and the social worker beginning to work on their pathway plan. The next section we look at is how best to support somebody. And here we're thinking about what others need to do to make sure that the person is supported in a way that makes sense to them. The things that professionals need to do to meet their statutory requirements and make sure the person gets the support they need, as well as the supporters help the person. This could be by making sure that the person always has communication aids with them when out and about, or for someone to complete a statutory assessment to access funding. Then we start thinking about the things that are working and not working. We ask what's working well and what's not working well from different perspectives. This allows the person to share which parts of their life is going well as what isn't going so well, but also gives family and professionals the chance to put their perspective on those things too. This is where we record differences of opinion, but it can also help us to see that even if there are things that are not working, there are always things that we can celebrate and that are going well. Excuse me. The next section is questions to answer. This heading allows people to ensure that any statutory requirements are addressed, as well as giving the person or their supporters a place to record any questions or issues they want to work out. A question in a school might be, is the statement of educational needs still relevant? Or for a person being supported, can I go on holiday this year? This information is pulled together and it helps us to form our outcomes and our actions. So once the information has been gathered and shared, the next stage is to explore any differences of opinion and generate actions based on what's working and not working for people and moving towards their desired future. In this way, the person-centred review makes it more likely that the person will have what's important in their life and move towards a future they want. Actions are agreed that keep what's working happening for the person and changes what's not working for them. The outcomes for the person are recorded. So these are the headings, but what's the process? Well, the first part of the review, the facilitator asks everybody to introduce themselves and contribute to the appreciation section. And that can be done in lots of different ways. So you can use rounds, or you can ask people just to write in as they come in. Then the facilitator goes through the progress on actions and can record feedback under what's not working, or questions to answer. Facilitator then asks everybody to grab a pen, all sorts of different colours, and to contribute their information underneath the headings. So it's really important that the facilitator can give a clear explanation of what those headings mean to people. Then there's mingling time. So mingling time, this is a really important part of the review. What this allows people to do is to start to chat, to start to share information more informally and start building relationships. The first part of the review either records for the first time or builds on what we understand about what's important to the person and how they want to be supported. We then compare this to how the person is living now by asking about what's working and what's not working from their perspective and others, and to think about what else we need to figure out or learn. We look at what the person wants in the future and what we can do to move towards that. We might need to see if change can be made within current structures and resources, or whether or not we need to change structure or funding. The actions agreed should change what's not working, add to our learning about the person and move closer to the life the person wants in their future. So I'm going to pass over to John now to talk a little bit about how we prepare for a person-centred review.
I remember one of the first times that I was supporting people getting ready for a review, and I spent some time talking to young people and to teachers and to TAs, and you know, I forgot about the parents, and when we started, the terrible thing was parents came in looking for that table and something to chair the meeting, and all they saw was papers on the walls, some nice drinks and some music playing. So preparation is crucial for everybody that comes to the review. And there's different ways to do that, I think. You can see that on the slide here, I've got personal invites to two guys to attend their reviews. And I love the way on the left-hand side there's a picture of Zach there. Zach couldn't write when I first met him, and how well he's done. I think this is his second review. And he's written to Mr. Ralph. So I'm having a pupil-centred review on the 4th of July. I would want you to come from Zach. So it's really kind of cool. A couple of pictures just to remind me who he is. Another invite I got was from a guy called Charlie. And Charlie's got, well, he's registered blind and he's got some hearing impairment as well. And I think you can just make out that actually Charlie's worked through Braille, and something's written over the top so I can read it as well. So a personal invite really kind of makes a difference, I feel, to a person-centred review. This is actually a little bit different to perhaps how statutory reviews happen. We spent some time with some people that we trained from HSA, asking them, you've been through our training, you've facilitated person-centred reviews. If you came back and you met some new people that had to deliver reviews, what would be your top tips for them? And I'd like to just share that with you, and I drew it as a mind map. And I think it really helps us thinking about great preparation. So let me talk you around, and I'm going to start at ground rules, and I'm going to work all the way around. Again, this was focused for young people in transition, but I think you can transfer and apply these top tips in any walk of life, really. So the first thing is ground rules and making sure you use them, so we're all clear and we agree how we're going to work together to feel comfortable and safe and think about the person. Top tip there is about the 5-minute rule. If somebody talks more than 5 minutes, we need to keep focused, we need to get back about the review, and we need to be kind of time limited as well, so we could write that down as a question to answer, or we could write that down as an action, or we need to kind of move on. Don't lose sight that it's about the individual. I was at a review recently where the providers and the family members were having a go at each other, really, and they forgot about whose review it was. So just remind yourself it's about the person that comes to the review. It says don't fight battles that you don't need to. Don't overload people with lots of work as well. Don't try to fix things. Don't make assumptions that everybody can write. A real top tip there about great preparation is not everybody can write. I've met some teacher and teacher assistants that got a bit panicky because they were worried that they would have to write in real time and whether they got their I or their E round the right way. I've supported parents writing. I've seen parents bringing pieces of paper in with pre-written information on that they could just stick under the headings. For Zach himself, he brought some stuff along because at that time Zach couldn't write. Make sure you send great information out. There's some stuff on the HSA website that you'll be able to find, both for the person and for family members. If you're facilitating a review, have a crib sheet, have something that helps you through the process. It's so difficult trying to think about the process, trying to think about engaging with people and keeping an eye on whose review it is. Also, great preparation is about having some good resources. So sort out some roles. I always find it better if somebody can write for me while I'm talking and discussing the points moving to action. Make sure you have a timekeeper so you don't kind of lose track of time. It doesn't have to be somebody that's in the organisation. It could be somebody independent. Good preparation is having music, usually is chosen by the person. Make sure your pens work. I know it sounds kind of ridiculous, but the worst thing you need is some pens that don't work when people are writing on the paper. Another top tip is maybe doing a small summary of what's happened in the review. Be realistic, but dream big as well. Small, realistic steps, but don't lose that thing about thinking about what's possible in somebody's life. Making sure we connect with people. And that kind of stone there, tablet of stone, we know the process works really, really well. You can be flexible within it, but don't change the process. Remember the agendas and use mini books. We have several mini books that help people through the process. Good kind of preparation reading those. Think about other people's agenda, maybe the local authority or the health or the education agenda. Know the people that can help you, and know the statutory bits that you have to do within the review as well. So it might be that you have to review the statement of special educational needs, or it might be that you just need to check on the care plan or the outcomes, or whether the outcomes and the money being spent is being spent appropriately. So there's some things around preparation and some top tips. And my thinking as well is just about how you involve people, especially people with complex needs. Maybe people that don't have a voice, where they can talk at their review. How do we listen to things that they want to say to us? And so I've just got a couple of examples here. You saw Zach before. And when we first was involved with Zach, we didn't realise had hearing impairment, so that stopped his speech. He couldn't speak, he couldn't hear, he was using a frame to walk, and tricky to work out what was important to Zach. And you can see from this photo here that we just kind of captured in the time, in the essence. If Zach was enjoying an activity or something, we got him to hold a happy face up, and if he didn't like something, we got him to hold a sad face up. And at Zach's review, his job was to stick the happy signs or the happy photographs under the things that were working, and the sad pictures or the unhappy faces under the things that weren't working. So Zach had a voice in his review, even though he didn't use words to communicate. I was also working with a guy from ethnic background who brought some Indian sweets. It was lovely culturally to bring that. And although he didn't use words to communicate and he had complex needs, and to be honest, I wouldn't know how much he could understand of the world around him. But he contributed, he was involved in his review. And the person showed objects of reference to him. So they brought up a tray of dried herbs, rosemary and lavender, and he crunched those. He loved crunchy things, sensory things, and got the smell. And he had a clicker switch on his wheelchair, pretty much the same as what you're seeing now. And he showed that he loved sensory gardening. And then we held up a towel and a swim float. Another slide he clicked on came up and showed that he absolutely loved swimming. And those were two things that were important in his life. And we actually realized that he wasn't being provided or supported to swim enough or to access gardening or a sensory garden. I've got some words here. I think Vicky and myself are just going to share some stories around this, really, about being present or having a presence. And my concern so often in reviews is that people might have a tokenistic presence at their review. They come in maybe at the end of the meeting when something's already been decided, or they might come for a couple of minutes and then leave. And then the big decisions are made without them. So just think about some top tips, really, about how do we support people, maybe that don't use words to communicate or have complex needs, to be present and have a presence within their review. A top tip, when I said about a guy in that wheelchair, I actually made sure the outcomes and the actions poster was right next to him. If you can visualize with me, if the guy was sitting on one side of the room and I was writing the actions on the other side of the room, your attention naturally will be looking at that piece of paper with the outcomes and actions, and the guy in the wheelchair will be forgotten about. So putting the two together, as we're talking and we're thinking about the person, we're writing up the actions with that person in eyesight. A top facilitator's tip I often use as well is if somebody can't speak to us and somebody offers us an idea or a suggestion or an action, I just say, I wonder what the person thinks about that. It's a cracking question because the person can't reply to us, but all of a sudden our attention, our focus is thinking about the individual and, hey, yeah, I wonder what they would be thinking about that decision or choice or action. I'm sure, Vicky, you've got a few stories to tell as well.
Yes, yeah, definitely. Just a few stories about some people that I've done reviews with. Hannah, a young lady who was 16, about to move out of school, and for her person-centered review, it was absolutely around her and the things that were really important to her. She'd made a scrapbook that she wanted to share with people, so she shared with her scrapbook with people before the review, and again, very much similar stories to you, John, around the sorts of things that asking the right questions to make sure that she was absolutely fully involved in that. Yuan, we'll see Yuan's one-page profile a little bit later on. In his first review, he used Switch It Maker to create a presentation, which he did before the review started, just so that he could share with people the things that were working really well for him, the things that weren't working for him, the things that were important to him, and how he was being supported. He decided that he didn't want music playing, but he's a great singer and he loves playing the keyboard. So while other people were putting their information up, he was singing and playing his keyboard. He'd already put photographs and symbols up prior to the review, so that preparation, again, really, really crucial there. A story about a young man called David who was in a long stay hospital and was going to be moved out. I was told when I was facilitating his review there's no way he'd stay in the room for more than 5 minutes. And he actually stayed for the whole hour of the review and was absolutely in his element. He knew everybody there, he was pleased to see everybody, and he knew that the review was about him. He used his photographs and his symbols to put his contributions up in the room. He was happy making drinks for people, making sure that people had got food, and it was just absolutely wonderful to see him absolutely involved in his own review.
I think that's a really good point, Vicky. I had somebody similar, and it's sometimes our assumptions that stops people having a presence. You know, there was a young guy with well, they call him severely autistic, And as soon as he saw Mum and Dad in the room, that's a visual indicator for him to go home to his parents for the weekend. And said, you'll be lucky if he survives 5 minutes. 40 minutes later, he's got his arm around his mum, listening to what's going on. So sometimes it's our assumptions, Vicky. I think you're absolutely right there. We have to kind of try things out. Have you got another story, Vicky?
Well, another one really that's similar to yours, around a young man called William who used objects of reference in his review, so he understood what we were talking about. Another young lady that I did a review for, she didn't want to write, even though she could write, she didn't want to write on the day. She felt a little bit nervous about that. So she chose to share her information on colour-coded cards. So she knew, for instance, that if there were blue cards, that those would go up under what was important to her. So again, it's that preparation and understanding about what makes people comfortable and how people can contribute in a comfortable way that's so important. Another example around that is a young lady who was blind, and around the preparation, she didn't want to hear what people liked and admired about her. What she wanted was for people to write that up, and then she wanted her mum to go over it with her after the review. So really, really important that you involve people in their reviews in a way that makes sense to them, in a way that they're comfortable with.
That's great, Vicky. I've just got one more story to share, if that's okay. Just thinking about having presence, and I've met some family members that says we've got really important things to talk about, and it will upset my son or my daughter, so I want a separate meeting. And obviously, we will be saying, well, it's a person-centred review, so the person should be supported to be there. And I've had a mum saying, yes, but I need to talk about this, and if I talk about this, it's going to upset my daughter. So I'm just going to talk through that scenario, if that's okay. And just, again, a couple of top tips. So Mum's a single mum and supporting Amy. And Amy's quite challenging in the mornings, which often meant she missed her transport. And Mum was going to work, and work weren't happy because she was turning up late. So the bottom line was that because of her daughter's behaviours, Mum might lose her job, which means she might lose her home. She was quite desperate in that respect. But she wanted to talk about it, her daughter's review, but knew if she talked about it, then her daughter would kick off even more the following few days, and that wouldn't be right. So how do we facilitate her daughter being present but still talking about those tricky situations? So Mum kind of needed a safety net, really, to allow her daughter to have presence at her review. So there's a couple of things. Vicky talked about a pen, using different colours pens, and I gave Mum a pink pen, and she was the only person with a pink coloured pen. And I just said to her, when we have that mingling time and everybody's writing on the boards, if you're really worried about something that we write about, just put a little mark, a little pink mark by there, and myself as a facilitator will know to be very cautious or be very careful if I'm going to talk about that area. And then we also had another thing, like, shut up, John, you're saying the wrong thing, which was a verbal prompt, which was, John, can I have a glass of water? So kind of in code, but it gave Mum a great safety net to sit in the review, knowing that her feelings, that she would be supported. Cut a long story short, we managed to talk about her daughter's behaviour. We managed to get some intervention the following day to support Mum so she could carry on working and supporting her daughter as a single mum. So sometimes it's just that kind of creative thinking, that allows the daughter to have a presence there, supporting family members as well.
Thanks, John.
Okay, so we need to think a little bit what happens after the review. So we take the papers off the walls. Sometimes people photograph those and take photographs within the reviews. I think that's lovely to see some interactions there and a visual memory. And boy, have you got it verbatim if you take photographs of what people have written. Some people type them up and put the photographs or the flip chart paper under, within that document. I've seen some local authorities actually changing their systems that actually fit into this person-centered review. So actually, it's just stuff that you do, which makes it easier. But we want to talk about two things specifically that happen after review. Vicky's going to talk about something around UN. She mentioned that before. And I'm going to talk about how we can collect information from reviews to help us think about commissioning change. So Vicky, what do you think you could do with the information from a person-centred review?
Well, the information can be used to develop a one-page profile, and I talked a little bit about Yuan before, and this is Yuan's one-page profile. So I wonder if you can guess anything that's important to Yuan from that photograph there. The one-page profile takes information from what we like and admire, or what we appreciate about that person. It also talks about the things that are important to them and how we best support them. So the information from the review can be used to create a one-page profile. If you have a one-page profile prior to the review, you can use it to update that information. So a one-page profile very much is a living document. I think an important thing to say as well, John, is around the actions. It's really important to have an action chaser, so that
good point.
Yeah, if we have somebody who is responsible just to check out that the actions and outcomes are being actioned upon, as it were,
sure.
And making sure that things get done. And that's not about checking up on whether people are doing their jobs or not, but just, are there any issues or any problems? Has anything got in the way? Do we need another meeting? Do we need to a couple of people need to get together? Are things moving along in the way that they should be? So I think that's really, really important. It's also important that the information gathered from the review feeds into services or systems, so that it impacts on statutory care planning, support plans, or even the single plan, as will be soon. So I think those are really important points as well.
That's great, Vicky. Thanks for that. Yeah, do you know, so often when I was working in the health and local authority, you would forget about people until a couple of weeks before their annual review, and then you look at it and think, oh my goodness, I should have done that. So you're absolutely right. To have somebody that would check those actions would be really, really kind of useful. The picture you're seeing now is some people doing something called Working Together for Change. And what we've learned is, can we use this rich information that comes from individuals, use that working, not working, and important to the future information to actually think about shaping services or shaping commissioning even. And this picture is done by a provider called Radian. And we had some people that use services, family members, some commissioners, some managers, some support workers, all in the same room. And you can see those cards on the wall are those yellow cards are actually statements from people's reviews. And so just imagine if we took 30 statements from people's annual reviews, from their person-centered reviews, of things that were working. Isn't it a cracking question? How do we make that happen, not just for 30 people, but how do we make those things that are working for 30 people, for 300 people? Brilliant kind of question. But also we're looking about how things aren't working as well, or not working. And what we've done here is that we've clustered or themed or aggregated those things that aren't working. And we've given speech bubbles, so the person's almost saying to us, I cannot choose my staff. I'm reading one there. And people are placing blue dots on there. So everybody has a voice in this meeting. If you're a CEO of a company, if you're somebody that's supported by that service or organisation, if you've been working for 30 years or 3 weeks, you have that equity of voice by putting a dot on what you think is important. It's a 2-day process that starts with great information from person-centred reviews, but we work through, in a co-produced way, some actions and some outcomes about changing for the organisation and changing for commissioning as well. So just a little taster, really, about how person-centred reviews can be used within organisations, but also within commissioners. And it's called Working Together for Change. So Vicky, can you just remind us what we've done?
Yeah, we've looked at the benefits of using person-centred reviews. We've looked at what a person-centred review looks like. We've thought about and talked about how to prepare for a person-centred review. We've looked at best practice in facilitating a person-centred review, what we need to do after the review, and we've talked about how we involve people with complex needs in their review.
Excellent, thanks for that, Vicky. So we're pretty good for time, and I'm hoping, as you've listened to Vicky and myself, there might be some questions there, or there might be some thoughts. Kerry explained how we do that. You use that kind of hand on the webinar kind of system. So So I'm just hoping that Claire will be there now. That will help us think. Hiya, Claire. Just thinking about some questions that people have. So we'll hand it over to you, Claire, if that's okay.
That's absolutely fine. We do have one question. It's a three-part question. I'll just dive right in. The first part is, how do PCRs feed into national outcomes framework? The next part is, are elements of PCR recognised by the national outcomes framework in relation to reporting? And the third part, in Wales, there is currently a consultation underway in regards to national outcomes framework. Is PCR being considered as part of this consultation?
Vicky, I know you got the Wales kind of thinking. Do you want to talk about Wales and outcomes and the consultation happening at the moment?
I'm not 100% sure, to be quite honest. The consultations that I've been involved in have been more to do with the development of the individual development plan, and most certainly outcomes are focused in that, and that's 0 to 25. I'm afraid I don't have any information other than that. But if the person would like to contact me directly, I can see if I can find any more information out about that.
Sure, we've got our contact details on there, so we can look at that. It's kind of interesting, the thing around national outcomes and our journey on that. And it's been, I don't think we've got a clear direction on that. If you want me to be upfront and honest, and as we went through our kind of journey, is that the outcomes came out of personal budgets or individual budgets, and local authorities were asked to feedback nationally on 7 different outcome domains, and they're supposed to capture that information and kind of work through that. I don't hear many local authorities telling me their collection around that information, but there are a few places that have done that. There's a few places. I know in Knowlesy, which is near Liverpool, they developed their paperwork and their thinking and their systems to think about outcome-focused reviews and worked within those domains. And there was good practice there because they worked across both health and local authority thinking. So they did joint training around that about outcomes and being outcome-focused, but also this kind of joint kind of thinking. So I guess my best tip for you is to have a look on that website, go onto their .gov website and see their kind of learning from that. A lot of people didn't start with outcomes, I think, as well on our journey. A lot of people started on how do we get the resource allocation system started rather than kind of outcomes. Our journey really is we need to think about outcomes. And there's a guy called Stephen Covey that says we should start with the end in mind or begin with the end in sight. And so often, rather than try to work out how we're going to get the process right, we should be looking at that end in sight or looking at outcomes. So we will look some more on that. That's my observations going around the country. I don't know if you've got anything else to add around outcomes, Vicky?
No. No, I don't. No, I know that outcomes are very much part in Wales around the individual development plan, and certainly within single plan in England. And the outcome-focused reviews from the Department of Health have got a publication out. Yeah. Are there any more questions, Claire?
That's all the questions I've got here.
Okay, so if the person would like to contact me, you can see our contact details there. And if there's nothing else, then all I need to say is thank you very much for listening. It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you.